Hey Sibs! One of the things that I like best about living in California is how easy it is to recycle. There are recycling bins everywhere. Every house has 3 different bins. One really big one for recycling bottles and cans, a much smaller one for regular garbage, and one about that same size for yard waste, which we never even use because we don't even have a yard. And then at work I have even more options because there's compostable things, non-paper recyclables, confidential paper that must be shredded, non-confidential paper, and finally, like, generic landfill waste. And I believe strongly in the importance of recycling, but it can still be kind of annoying trying to figure out what to do with all the stuff that I have that I need to throw away. I mostly decide based on what the thing's made out of, but it seems that other people use other factors. Researchers Remy Trudel and Jennifer Argo published a study in the Journal of Consumer Research, in which they found that people are more likely to trash items that appear damaged. So whole pieces of paper or whole bottles and cans that are unblemished, those go in the recycling, but a dented bottle, broken bottle, dented can, crushed can, or scraps of paper, those go in the trash. Which, of course, doesn't really make any real sense. What's even more amazing is that another study found that people were much more likely to recycle a cup that had their name written on it than a cup with no name or with their name misspelled. So the researchers called this recycling bias, and it's a more specific form of a more general idea called unconscious bias, where when faced with the need to make a decision, we basically have 2 ways that we can do it. We can stop and think about the problem and come to some sort of logical conclusion about the right decision to make, but most of the time we don't bother with doing anything that takes that long. Instead, we make some sort of a snap judgment, often based on some internal unconscious rules that we don't even know that that's what we're using to make the decision. In this case, the researchers hypothesized that people are unconsciously judging an item's usefulness, and thus its ability to be recycled, based on how good it looks or whether it's important to them. And things that look damaged are trash, so they go in the trash. Now, let's suppose that you're at Starbucks, and you've just finished your favorite fancy coffee drink, and on your way out, you chuck your cup in the trash instead of the recycling. Why did you do that? Maybe they misspelled your name. Maybe you just didn't know that you could put this in the recycling. Whatever the reason, you didn't really give it a lot of thought. You're just leaving, and you have to chuck it somewhere, and that's the first place it occurred to you to chuck it. Now, suppose that the barista shouts at you and says, "Hey, recycle that! Don't you care about the environment?" Now, how do you react to that? Do you realize your mistake and attempt to correct it? Well, maybe. But if it were me, I can tell you that I'd be feeling embarrassed and defensive. I mean, it's just one cup. Why are they shouting at me? I didn't mean any harm. It's just, what's the big deal? Or there's some kind of environmental Nazi or something? What's the big deal? So, I might even feel that way even if I wasn't one getting shouted at. If I was just observing the barista shouting at someone else. Because maybe I thought I might very well have done the same thing, and even if I weren't, why is the barista making such a big deal about this? Now suppose that you're the barista. You feel very passionately about recycling, and it doesn't seem like such a big deal to ask people to put the cups in the right bin. And what's more, you know that you have a great old big bin for recycling and a teeny weeny little bin for trash, and you're going to have to go and fish those cups out of the recycling and put them in the out of the trash and put them in the recycling, or you're going to get charged a fine for having too much garbage. So it could be very difficult with seeing people throw these in the wrong place all day not to feel resentful about these people who are making more unpleasant work for you. So both the barista and the customer or observer then now feel victimized, and they see the other side as being totally unreasonable or selfish, even though both of them are really innocent of any evil intent. The worst thing about unconscious bias is just how very unconscious it is. We're making judgments all the time that we don't even know that we're making, and certainly don't take time to consider rationally. Often we don't even realize we're making a judgment because the thought is just that automatic. Why is that customer throwing his recyclable cup in the trash? It must be because they just don't give a flip about the environment. What a jerk. It can take a serious conscious effort to even notice that you're making judgments like this. Now, I have an unconscious bias against black people. I know that this is true because there's some very clever researchers at Harvard who figured out a way to test for unconscious bias. And I took their online test, and they have a lot of other very interesting online tests to determine whether you have various other biases and how strong those biases are. I'll be sure to include a link in the doobly-doo so you guys can try it out if you like. So when I have to, what does this mean? It means that when I have to make a judgment call between two people, one of whom is black and one of whom is white, and all other things being equal, chances are I'm going to tend to automatically favor the white person. It takes a conscious effort for me to overcome that, recognize the bias, and focus on facts and making the decision rationally. And the more stressed I am and the less information that's available to me, the more likely I am to go with the bias. I'm not really happy that I have this bias, but I'm not terribly surprised either, and it doesn't make me a bad person or a racist. It just means that my brain has this habit of making a shortcut in judgment that it really shouldn't. So unconscious bias against race is not the same thing as racism. I feel very passionately about the importance of eliminating racism and the unfairnesses that arise from it. And I have no conscious belief that black people are worse than or inferior to white people, but not all decisions that I make are really fully conscious ones. My unconscious bias could easily lead me to make a snap or unfair judgment based on race. Somebody observing me might then mistakenly call me a racist, because they would be just as wrong as the barista accusing the customer of not caring about the environment. I believe a lot of the discussion about race that goes on in this country is like my story about the barista and the customer. There's misunderstanding on both sides. People who are passionate about the need to eliminate racism, particularly those who are personally affected by it, are like the barista. They're likely to interpret acts of unconscious bias as if they were consciously intended to be racist. But then on the other hand, other people are like the customer or the observer. They know that they didn't intend any harm, and they don't have any conscious belief that the other race is bad. So they feel falsely accused and angry, and they're prone to assume that the accuser is just being totally unreasonable and discount all of their complaints. Both sides are wrong, of course. Just because you didn't mean any harm doesn't mean that no harm was done, and just because harm was done does not mean that somebody intended to do harm. It's, to quote from the best sci-fi show ever on television, understanding is a three-edged sword. There's your side, my side, and the truth. Until next time, stay shiny, guys.